Welcome to Prose Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hey guys, just making a little public service announcement thing here. We try and make this content for you guys as much as possible, people who are maybe just starting writing or who just like listening to writers and hearing what their opinions are. And we always want to know how we can make the show better, how we can improve it, what you would like to hear. We've made a little contact link that you can click down in the About section, the show notes. Jump on there, it'll take you to a website where you can fill in your details and ask us any questions you want or make any requests you want. And I'd really suggest you do that because we're trying to make it better and better for you. And obviously, the more we hear back from you, the more likely we are to do fun stuff that you like. So yeah, feel free to drop us a line if you get a chance. I'm here with the wonderful Catherine Jinks, writer, Australian author of, I think, more than 60 novels you've done.
No, more than 50. Well, 50 books.
Okay.
There have been some picture books and...
Oh, okay. Yep. Well, so yeah, 50. Okay, cool. So there's plenty of written work out there, which is fantastic. Many awards as well, I believe, which is great. The one I'm thinking of is for, was it Shepherd? You won the Australian Horror Writers?
Yes, I did. Yeah, best Australian Shadows.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And many others. One for Evil Genius as well, I believe. Thank you so much for meeting with us. It's a pleasure. So, look, I'll just jump right into it. You are extremely prolific. You've been writing since the mid-90s, am I right? Or
when did I first publish? I think the first publish was actually like 91 or 2. No, it was... Yeah, look, I can't remember, to be honest. It was very early.
In a minute.
Yeah, no, it was either 89 or 90.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
You have written a lot of books since then, as we said, around 50 or so, which is quite a pace to be releasing material at, which I'm in awe of. I think you and I was doing a little read of your FAQ, and I think you and I have a similar thing when it comes to writing, in that we really enjoy the writing process and we really like making new things and going forward with that. But it's the editing that we sort of get caught up on a little bit. Am I right?
Well, it's not so much even my own editing. Like I edit I don't know how profane you could.
No, you're fine.
Edit the fuck out of my stuff.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
I mean, I read it and read it and read it and edit and read it and read it and edit and read it and read it. You know, like I can't tell you how much I do that. Like it's just insane, you know. But it's when the edit comes back from someone else. I've been doing it for so long that I do know what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Often what happens too these days is editors are very overworked and they can't really put the effort in that they need to. And so they'll miss things. They'll say something and you'll go, that was like 5 pages back. I mentioned it. Did you not see it? You know, like, because one of the skills I've developed over decades is holding the whole book in my head, like really holding it.
Yeah.
And they can't be expected to do that because they haven't been living with it for 10 months or whatever.
Sure.
12 months. So they aren't quite as on top of things usually. I mean, I've had some brilliant editors, but they're few and far between, frankly. Like,
okay. Yeah.
But it's partly the situation at the moment. They'd be okay if they weren't appallingly overworked and underpaid. Like it's
right. So this is, we're talking about a publishing house, traditional publishing, and I'll come back to that term. Traditional publishing house editor, where you've sort of submitted a manuscript and they've accepted, and they're going, okay, we're going through it now. We have to edit it and go through it. This isn't someone that you've paid to edit your work.
No.
Okay,
sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay, because it's a different. They're two different things.
If anybody wants to pay me to edit their stuff, by the way, I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's becoming this sort of new world where a lot of obviously the traditional model is such that the
traditional model is in a lot of trouble. Like it's at the moment really bad. Like it's hard to sell, and it's partly hard to sell, I think, because it's mass. They're looking for a mass market, because to produce they do have print on command, but a lot of people don't do it. I think this kind of niche publishing is where, because things are breaking up into niches on the internet, it's, you know, and trying to do that in a traditional publishing house is quite hard. I mean, trying to appeal to massive amounts of people is quite hard. I mean, it happened. I was there when it happened with Harry Potter and Twilight and all of them. Like, it happened and they got so excited and and there was a lot of money around and it was so great. But now it's changed again and it's hard. It's very hard.
And I guess we see these because I read a lot of sort of commercial fiction. I read this really great one by Rebecca Kwong recently, who did the Poppy Wars back in the day, and it's called Yellowface, and it is literally about the writing and publishing market, and it's it just seems like a bit of a nightmare, honestly. Like, and this is at the top echelon of, like, you know, what's going on.
My agent's been doing this for much longer than I've been writing. Like, she's I don't know, probably close on 40 years. She says she's never seen it so bad ever.
All right. Okay.
So she's getting quite.
Yeah, sure. And is that exclusively Australian, or you think that's international?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's harder to get international sales now, definitely. But that's kind of partly, there's more gatekeepers now. She used to go out directly to international agents.
Sure.
And they would place me, and that's what happened when I managed to get into America and everything.
Yeah,
it was directly with the agents, but now it tends to go through your publishers, and that's, you know.
Right. Okay. So there's just more.
There's a whole structure. Like, once upon a time, she used to go to an agent, so I used to have to pay 2 lots of agent fees, but the agent would go to get an American publisher, and then the American publisher would pay their royalties straight to me. But now what happens is Australian publishers want international sales, want the international rights, like the full rights, world rights.
Sure.
So if they manage to sell it, and they sell it to another publisher, but the international publisher's royalties come back through my publisher. So they use those royalties to pay off my advance. So I don't get it straight. You know,
so it's being siphoned on the way back, right?
Siphoned. Yeah, that's the way it works.
Yeah, right. Well, let's take it back to when you first started. How did you actually get into becoming a published author? What did that look like? You know,
it was a different old world then.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Okay, many years ago, and I was working for Westpac.
Okay.
On their staff magazine, and I wrote this book that's completely been forgotten. It was my second book that made a hit. That was Pagan's Crusade. First book was nothing, but it was okay. It was publishable.
Just didn't pop.
Possibly not now. I don't know. And I wrote it, and the thing is, I was really lucky. It was a luck, because I knew a woman who knew an agent. And the thing was, though, it has to be said. So I managed to get this agent's phone number, and she answered the phone, and I sort of explained I was a friend, you know, and she was so unenthused. She went, okay, well, I guess I can have a look at it. It'll probably take me, it might take me 2 or 3 months. I'm warning you, you know.
Sure.
So, and I went, okay, that's fine. And of course, in those days, it was a manuscript.
Yeah, it was a physical manuscript, right?
You know, and I sent it off. I didn't even have a computer. Okay, I typed it. So that's how old I am. And so I sent it off, and she got back to me in about 2 or 3 days, and she goes, "This is great. We can publish this." And I'm like,
oh wow!
Oh my God, it was like a magic moment.
Yeah, right.
But in those days, it was the children's. It was kind of harder, but kind of easier. There weren't many books. There weren't as many books being published. You know what I mean? Actually, so it was a smaller raft that you had to climb onto. But I don't know. It was
more money to those ones, those ones that were being
published. Yes, there was. It was,
yeah.
And it was a children's book.
Okay.
And in those days, the children's book Council of Australia had such an amazingly important role to play.
Yeah, I recall that.
Yeah, and if you got on their
As a child.
shortlist, which my second book did get on, it made such a difference. Like, it was huge. Nowadays, not so much.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got, with my first book, it didn't do anything. Like, especially children's books, you didn't get much. Like, you didn't get much in the way of reviews or anything like that.
Sure.
Don't read reviews. I mean, there were some. There was magpies. There was something else. There were like 2 or 3 like educational type, teaching type, librarian type places where they reviewed children's books, and very little else. I think they'd review you if you got shortlisted in the sort of papers, you know.
Okay.
But because it made such a difference, like the CBC awards were so big, it made a big difference to me to get that listing. So that's what happened to me. So I was kind of lucky, but also that second book I wrote, Pagan's Crusade, it was different. It was very different because it was, I actually first wrote it as a radio play, and I couldn't I didn't know really anybody in radio, and I tried and it didn't really work. So I thought, I'll just rewrite it as a book. So it was rewritten as a kind of an odd, it was like first person, present tense, humorous and slangy, but set in the medieval times. So it was weird. And in fact, my agent couldn't get it published initially. Like, she got about 3 slapbacks.
Okay.
And I would have given up at that point because I was very new.
Sure.
And I didn't know from anything. And she said, no, this is really good. We can find a publisher. And she found, I think it was the 4th or 5th publisher that accepted it. And it went really well, and it got shortlisted. So, you know, but it was a little bit different from everything at that stage.
Okay. Yeah. And this was like I think you described it on your FAQ as like, it's kind of Monty Python-esque.
Yes,
like
yes, and Blackadder-ish.
Quite funny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm with you there. All right. Cool. Well, let's have a look at a little bit of the writing process itself, because as much as I do like to talk shop about the ins and outs of the industry, because it's always a pleasure to talk to people who have actually been in it. Yes. So, look, are you like a taker-outer or a putter-inner? And what I mean by that is, are you the sort of person who gets to the end of a manuscript and goes, oh, there's way too much here, I need to take this out? Or are you the opposite, where you have to go back and go, oh, wow, I've left a lot of stuff out? Or is it just you're pretty much done?
It's interesting. That's such a long time. Okay, it's funny. It's just become such second nature. Okay, so I used to be a person who just sat out and wrote, and then with I think it was my third full novel, I could never finish. I hadn't thought about it enough, and then I thought to myself, okay, this is not going to happen again. I'm going to plan the ass out of this. And so I now do massive, great synopses before I start, like some kind of screenwriter. Like big chunks of dialogue. I basically work out my whole plot. Not necessarily entirely the chapter breakdowns, because sometimes things go longer than you think and all that, but vaguely pinned down to chapters. So I've got it all there. And the reason I do that is because when you're doing something really long, you just get to the point where you think you're going to die and you never want to see it again. And, you know, how far is the end off? But if you've got this plan here, all you have to do is, I got my plan. Okay, what's the next thing? You're getting really tired of it. You're just finding it hard to get that spark.
I'm getting to that point where it's like, because I usually just sit down and go, and then I'll get to about, I don't know, maybe like 30,000 words and be like, oh my God, it's not even halfway. What's going on? So now what I've started to do is, it's not quite that, but I'll like write out a little, just a dot point list of things that are going on. Not to the end of it. I haven't done to the end of the book yet, but at least for the next like big chunk. And then I guess when I get to that, I'll chunk it out again. And that's been really helpful. Just being like, oh, no, this is the thing that happens next. You know?
And so when you do it like that, you don't usually have too much or too little, because you've done a lot of that planning. You've done a lot of creative work beforehand. Like, it's amazing. I can spend months planning it and working it out before I actually sit down and write chapter 1. Like, I do that now. And it just means that, A, you don't get the really terrible edits from people at the end. Can I just also say, on the subject of edits?
Yeah, please.
I'm old now. Like, I'm really quite old. So
You're not that old, Catherine.
Yeah, I am. But, I've been doing it for so long. I've realized you have to change. Like, what I wrote at the beginning, I look at some of my early books and I think, oh my God, it's so slow. Like, it's what things have got faster and faster and faster, because people watch movies most of the time. They're used to Hollywood 3-act structures. They just, they can't, it's amazing. They just can't wait. Can't wait.
Well, because I was reading through, I'm going through Traced right now, and the beginning of that is like, she's on a phone call, and I won't give any spoilers, but she's on a phone call, she's talking to someone, and immediately you can see there's something very serious going on, and like almost from the first sentence, I can't remember what it is, but I think it's something about how the woman's breathing or something, and you can just tell something's going on here, and it's not all right.
I mean, that is partly okay. So what's happened is, gradually over the and just writing,
and these are thrillers too. These
are thrillers.
Yeah.
And I'm quite good at it, but I had to be kind of beaten into submission a bit by the editor. It's this push-pull thing. She's kind of trained me to some degree to be as lean and mean as possible, to the point where I'm like, no, we have to keep that. Like, that's you have to have some scene setting description. You have to have it. Like, you have to, because you've got to visualize this. You've got to be able to see it. You've got to have that in it. I know it slows it down for like 12 seconds. I know that. But I've got to have it. So it's getting to that point now, especially with thrillers, though, has to be said.
Yeah, of course.
Without more artsy literary stuff, I think they give you a
room to breathe,
to move. But, when you look at the old novels that start off, in 1746 in the county of M, a gentleman, like, it takes so long to get into it, like, which is fun. I love it. As long as you feel that you're in the hands of someone who understands what they're doing. Like,
they're like talking about a moor for like five pages.
Somebody's talking about the father of the heroine for a while. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whereas
he was a well-groomed, dapper man.
And it's just sort of, people have just got more and more, they've got less and less time to meck around. And look, I feel the same way. Like, I'm a bit, if you haven't got me by about the end of page 2, I'm like, not exactly, it doesn't have to be immediately actiony. It just has to be the sense that
it has to be engaging.
There has to be some sense that this person knows what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. This person's walking down the street. I'm really interested to see what happens next. You know what I mean? There's just, I don't know, there's something. Whereas it's too much. I'm not a big fan of very, I don't know, atmospheric, poetic writing. If I notice the writing too much, if I notice things like turns of phrase or stuff, if I just notice it just a bit too much, it distracts me.
It pulls you out of it. Yeah, no, we're the same way. Like, I can, and I'm sure you can as well, write like flowery prose, if I want to, but I find very rarely is that actually appropriate, because it's like you've got to move the story along. You've got to have like a narrative momentum, and
you can give a good synonym. You can use verbs in an interesting way. You can use slap or something in an unusual way to get attention, and it works. That kind of, that sense of bang, that's a new way of looking at things. But the sort of continual complications that used occasionally, that's incredibly effective.
Concision.
But if that's too much of it, it just, I don't know, it just really annoys me.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And I find a lot of writing that these days is going along that path where it's like just tell me what happened. Like give me the facts. And like, yeah, you can give me a really nice simile or metaphor or like
Well,
a
you do it. Yes.
particularly strange adjective that goes in there and that'll like hook you
Yeah.
and be like that.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you become hung up on the details of it, of how it's put down, and there's like more than it's several sentences where you're really like laboring, and it's like I remember reading as a child. This is a child, reading the Red Wall books. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but it's about a bunch of like an anthropomorphic mice and stuff, and they're all little warriors and things, and they would dedicate pages and pages to talking about this feast, and I'm like, I don't care how glazed the cranberries are. I just don't care. Just tell me who's stabbing who, or at least tell me.
Like I think that might be a devotee of let's face it, Tolkien.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
Like
sure. It is a very fantasy thing. Yeah,
it's a feast. Feasts feature greatly, and
yeah, people love feasts.
Tolkien. I'm just trying to think. Like actually, the Narnia books had a touch of it as well. But then, with kids' books, way back, one of the things you'll notice quite a lot is that they will put a lot of food in them because kids like food. And I remember, to be honest, being hungry when I was a child. I don't know, we had very stern meal times and we and so I was starved. So, there's a lot of stuff about picnics, like Toad of Toad Hall, like the all of that. They always have picnics and they talk about their food a lot. So does Inesbit, lots of food. So with kids stuff, that's what they would have. It would have been a combination of Tolkien and the fact that
you're getting a double whammy.
Kids' book used to have a lot of food.
But see, the thing is, I can remember reading not the name of the wind, Wind in the Willows, and not being at all put off. I don't even remember the food stuff in that because I just remember it being such a great story and like hearing about like Toad's adventures and Badger being this like cranky old guy, and like it was very engaging because I don't think they had these big. Maybe they did have big chunks of paragraphs where they were talking about the picnic, but either way,
if you're good enough, you can surmount that kind of because that's the old-fashioned style of writing, and if you can, that's the other thing. If they're good enough writers, but they're old-fashioned, they're so good that you just slide into it anyway, and you can cope with the old style of writing.
Yeah. If
you plug at it, though, a lot of people can't cope with Victorian writing anymore; they just can't. But it's interesting.
It is what it is. Yeah. Now I've noticed you move a lot between genres and things, which is something I'm always, as a writer, always very nervous of doing because I'm like, I'm thinking in terms of branding and be like, oh, well, I want to be a horror writer, which is a lot of what I write is horror. But right now I'm doing sort of a literary commercial thing. So I'm like, how is this an issue to be able to do this one thing and have a readership and a reader base going through the stuff, and then, if I do this thing, will they like that? Do I need to do a new author name? Stuff like that. How have you found that, but being sort of moving between genres a little bit?
Really, that's a really good question. I've kind of shot myself in the foot. Basically, because I started so long ago.
Yep.
I was put in the box of children's writer for a long time because that's what I wrote for.
Sure.
I was very young. I was only, I think, 25 when I wrote my first one, and I was not very adult at that point anyway. So, I was fairly childlike. So I was writing children's books for ages. Now, the good thing about children's books is that you can skip around, but you're still a children's writer. So I skipped around in all kinds of genres within the children's book era. Now, you can't sort of do that as well as an adult writer. So I got to do all these exciting things because I got bored so easily and I just needed to move around. And also, I think it was significant that I started off in children's writing because children's writing, it's all about the plot and getting there fast because you have to.
Sure. Kids get bored.
They're not gonna put up with you if you don't. So, and that's what, and the fact that I ended up going to thrillers and things, I think, it's all plot based. However, I have done adult sort of historical fiction, which was slower. But what happened was I was branded as a children's author anyway. And when you start writing for adults after that, you have a bugger of a time.
It's an uphill battle for sure.
It's okay if you're an adult writer who dabbles in children because it's slumming,
Sure.
but
Yeah. Okay.
going the other way is just really hard. So I was kind of, and I've done it, and I have, but again, it blurred my brand, which nobody ever had until about 10 years ago. So
right.
I just, all I did was keep myself interested.
Sure.
And that's as
well,
I
you're
grew
still
up.
writing. That's the important thing.
Yeah, well, I'm still writing. It's harder and harder to get published.
Sure.
Also, if you've got a long history of, in a funny sort of way, it's better if you've got a long history of it, and it's worse because if you've got a long history and it's not the history of, Peter Carey or Helen Gardner or something, if it's sort of it's an okay history, it doesn't work for you every new one you get because it doesn't look like you go. Whereas if
I see. You don't box yourself in. Like people think of Peter Carey and they're like, oh yeah, great historical fiction, and he's like, yeah, but I kind of want to write this like romance fantasy.
Yeah,
thing
but
now.
Peter Carey basically is really successful, and so is Helen Gardner. But if you're not really like a cultural icon and you keep going and you trying to get published, people look at your backlist and they think, well, you didn't do too well for this, and maybe you won't do too well for this. You know what I mean? Right. Whereas if you're new, they don't know what you're going to do. So it's all very exciting. So you could be the bet. Like, I mean, J.K. Rowling was a sort of a bet, and it was like the most successful bet ever. And and it can happen with. Graham Simpson with wrote the Rosie Project. That was the first one, and that just blew it out of the water. Yeah, it exploded. And that's what people are looking for. So they kind of like sometimes a newbie, and Joan Harper.
Like, you're with the dry, right?
Yeah, like if they can do that, and so it's, mind you, and you see, you've got somebody like Gary Disher. Now, Gary Disher went along like me for ages and ages, and then suddenly it just flipped, and he's he's selling very well on this kind of thriller, like a crime series thing, and he put in the hard yards for years, as did what's her name, Big Little Lies. What's it called? Big Little Lies? No, what's it called?
I know the.
Yeah. I suddenly had this brain. Leanne Moriarty. Now she went years doing her thing. Mind you, it was always she had a brand, and she was doing.
And they were sticking in a lane, were they?
Yeah, and she was sticking in her lane, and she did it for years and was kind of plugging away, and then it took off. So it can happen, but it's people are less. Yeah. Anyway, it just.
Yeah. So it's like there's a value in, because that's always like I always get really nervous about like, oh, this is my debut, and technically I put out a collection of short stories, but like it was on Amazon, no one saw it, so. But if you're putting out like a debut novel, it's like, oh, this is my debut. No, it's like popping your literary cherry. You don't want to so you want to pick your battles there, I guess. But then that gets muddied up with the self-publishing thing, where you can kind of do that, and that is, I think, is more regarded a little bit more regarded now, but I think is still fairly poo-pooed in literary circles. It's like, well, that's not real writing, which is not terribly fair, but.
I can see, it is, but I think things are changing so much.
Yeah. Just because of the money, people are following the money. Like if you can't make money from a certain style of books or a certain pipeline of where the cash is going, things are going to have to change, and I think they are changing now, from what I can see, from the little that I've seen of it.
If I had any techno now, I'd be looking at that kind of thing probably now.
Yeah, like TikTok is, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but like it is. I was just listening to an author interview, a podcast yesterday about a girl who blew up on TikTok, and she started in like fantasy TikTok when it was just very small, and she just made this little video and it blew up, and then this fan base sort of swelled around her, and now she's published all around the world, although mind you, not full time yet, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to say.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if that had been around, I probably would have done it. Like, you know what I mean? You're from your era. But, but I have, plug it.
You have a YouTube
My
channel
new
now.
YouTube channel. Woo!
Yeah. What's that? Just give us the what's the name of the YouTube channel?
Okay. So because I was looking at a lot of YouTube channels to calm myself down, in the sort of cottagecore, pretty English style travel and all that kind of stuff, because I'm a middle-aged person, I suddenly thought, hey, I could do this and maybe talk about
owning your brand.
yeah, and talk about writing at the same time, and my books get a bit of. So I literally only it's not even a week ago. I started.
No,
but
I've seen one of the videos. It's very good. I liked it a lot.
The content I'm making furiously in case I have to turn around and do a whole bunch of work when I can't film.
Sure.
And also it's really good weather for filming at the moment, whereas
totally.
But it's called Storybook Cottage Writer YouTube channel.
Storybook Cottage Writer YouTube channel.
Storybook Cottage Writer. I'm trying to get the cottage core, and I'm trying to get the people who are interested in books. So yeah.
That's good. No, that's awesome. And I looked at it. It's just it's a nice sort of thing to watch, and a nice thing to see how someone who's been doing it for a while does it. And let's be honest, your cottage it's exactly that. Like, you go into it and it looks like a cottage. She's got this huge fire roaring. You've got a nice little desk and a nice little typewriter that you do. You can see it here on the screen. It's just everything's very, very wooden and nice polished wood floors, and it's a beautiful place to write, which is
Thank
great.
you. Yes, it is.
Just circling back to the career writer thing, I think one of the good things. I mean, we did talk about having a debut go off and be very exciting, and everyone be like, "Oh, they're doing something new, or they haven't done too much before." But I think one of the good things about writing, as opposed to say music, is that you aren't really cut off by your age. Like, you can continue to write, and look, obviously, if you have a history, that's going to sort of put I don't want to say taint, but like put a certain thing on your brand. But it is, like you said, Leanne Moriarty writing the same thing for a long amount of time, and then kind of took off. So it is something that, because obviously the craft is always improving, and people know good writing when they see it. And you're a good writer. Like, and I've read some of your stuff, and it is good writing, in my humble opinion. So yeah, I don't know. Have you got any tips for longevity in terms of not burning yourself out?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess, look, honestly, okay. I started off. It's okay. It's a sort of a life. It goes into life at that point. Okay, there's a few things. My agent said many years ago, and she said it every so often again. She says the real writers and the people who aren't real writers, and that she said the real writers are just simply people who cannot function in life without it. Like, it helps them live, and they can't live very well without it, and so they just keep doing it as some kind of creative thing of some nature, because that's how they have to go. So the longevity of it is whether you still need it all that time, or the other thing is, I started off writing and I had a job and I managed it anyway. It was a bit of a 9 to 5 at that job, so thank God.
Yeah, okay. And then you were writing in your off time, were you? Like at night?
And I was writing in my off time. However, I wouldn't have wanted to do that forever.
No.
I think it's just too hard.
That's a lot.
And I did get married, and then we moved to Canada, and I couldn't get a work. Oh, it was hard. Well, we moved to Canada in the middle of this massive recession back in 1992.
Oh yeah, there was a recession.
1993. Yeah,
I was 2, so I couldn't.
Yeah. So I was like, I couldn't really find a job anyway. So, and in those days, just for various, like, so he was earning the full time, and I was earning some money, but not as much as I would have normally. See, I've sort of gone not earning much, and then I sort of really went up, and then I went down again. So it's been
so like a bit of a bell curve thing.
So in a way, partly because I got married, and there was a pooling of resources.
Yes.
That allowed me a bit
Economy
more
of scale.
time. Yeah. So there was that. And that gave me also in 95, I think, I managed, it was after Pagan's Crusade, and maybe even the second one come out, the Pagan in Exile. I got a grant. I got a literary grant. It's the only literary grant I've ever got.
Okay.
And it was for 3 years.
Wow.
And it was for $25,000 a year.
Jeez, that's more than the Vogel.
It was so great. It was
That's
just
amazing.
the best ever. And look, honestly, I keep on saying, like, that was an investment they made in me. So that was like $75,000. And it worked because I made back I calculated at one point, because I felt like a complete wanker and a complete parasite, the way people talk about writers, and parasite,
Sure.
And I realized that I'd sold so much overseas and I was bringing in all this foreign currency, and I brought in over, at one point I was, I sort of added it up over whatever, 7 years or something. I brought in over $1 million in foreign currency.
That's crazy.
Australian.
For your writing, you brought in $1 million to Australia.
Yes, it was to me, like, it was over a fair few years, but
I get it.
Yeah, it was US dollars, some pounds, and all of that. And so I was helping the GVP, they invested in me.
That's
and
a 10-to-1 investment. That's good ROI.
I know. So I was like, giving people grants is not a waste of money. It's not a parasite. Like, I haven't been a parasite.
It's a cultural investment. Like, that sounds like a wanky term, but it is a cultural investment, and God knows.
But it's also a monetary investment. You got your money.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
The money is derived from the culture. It's like you're like, here's a little injection of cash that we're going to use to let you create culture. Then you can export that will bring home money to us as a country.
Exactly.
So yeah. That's great. Let's have a little chat. I know you haven't actually had anything made, but you did mention on your FAQ that you've had several offers for people to make movies or maybe TV shows of your book. Can you tell us a little bit about how that sort of works?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's happened it's more than half a dozen times. Okay. Over the many years. All right.
Sure.
And what happens is, because I've always worked through the same agent, she will get a call or an email from a producer who wants to option the book. And basically, that is not anything.
Sure.
I mean, basically, if you're lucky, you might get $2,000 for that.
Okay.
And it almost never happens. Like, I've yet to get anything made.
Sure.
There's something happening at the moment. I won't talk about it, but it's probably more possible than it's ever been before. But you get to this point when they're trying to raise the money. That's where it all falls apart. So you get the production company, whatever it is. It might be 2 people and a dog, or it might be quite a solid little one.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple. I've had 2 Hollywood producers. That was for Evil Genius. Both of them, it didn't work. It didn't happen. And I've had a bunch of Australian producers for various things, including Evil Genius. That was again for Evil Genius is the one that people have tried mostly.
Sure.
And they option it, and this has happened both ways. Either you're not involved at all, but my agent, who's thank God a lawyer, actually helps thrash out a contract. And usually I think you get the standard thing in the past, but Netflix has blown it all up. And so, and Disney and the sort of all of that sort of stuff, it's got really hard. But once upon a time, it was like you get around 2 or 3% of the production budget.
Okay.
Which can, and like, for example, there might be a bottom floor so that no matter what the production budget is, you get at least 150,000 if they start to film.
Okay. Sure.
But I've never got to that point ever, because
of course. Yeah.
what happens is they often get a whole pitch done. This is happening right now. They've got pilot episodes thrashed out. They've got their costings. They've got all of this stuff. And then they go, and then they need a certain amount of money, and they go and try to find partners. Like even if you get one partner, they'll only cough up so much money if some other person will come in.
Sure.
And
You've got to get
the money raised, as you would expect.
Yeah. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So basically, one over and over and over again, it just doesn't happen. So and it's so, and look, it can take 10 years. Like it's a slow, difficult process, and you're lucky if it happens.
Sure. Yeah, and I've heard this from other authors too. I was interviewing Keelan Patrick Burke the other day, who's a really good horror writer, and he was like, "Look, every time I get an option now, I'm like, yep, great, give me the money. Like, I'm not, I'm not crossing my fingers." And he hasn't had anything made yet either. Although he has, in the same way, had things optioned. So it sounds like it's a really, really, really tough gig.
Once I got, in fact, twice I've had involvement in the screenwriting, and that was great because it gave me I was being paid quite well to learn how to screenwrite. It was fantastic. I was working under a script editor. I was working under the script editor who did Babadook.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was fantastic. Like that was the best experience, and and you know what? It informed my writing afterwards as well, because it's so, like, it can be an utter straitjacket screenwriting, but I don't know, the sort of the sense of control that people have, this immense sense of control. I've been a bit sloppy. It's hard to explain the sense of thematic control, the sense of controlled imagery. Everything is under control because it's so expensive. So everything is so under control that you feel like, I think it helped with my thriller writing. In fact, I know it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. In fact, after writing that script, after adapting a couple of times my books as scripts, I thought, I wonder if I can write an original one, right? So I sat down and I wrote this script. And of course, I know nobody, I mean, I know a few people, but not to have any kind of push. And of course, it wasn't ever going to go anywhere. And then I made it into Shepherd. Because
Shepherd. Yeah, you mentioned that.
So that is actually from a screenplay. And you can
you wrote the screenplay first, and then that translated that into a novel.
And then I made it into a and you can tell from the structure it's so it's so 3-act.
Yeah.
But so it really helped me. In a way, it really helped me, I think, too, because it's in a way, the way people watch movies these days has informed the way they read. And so it's actually good to have all that stuff and know how to get that condensed format down and put a book like that. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I really do want to learn to screenwrite one day, because I think it's just a great skill to have. And our mutual friend Ali is actually a really good screenwriter. Yes.
I might have to hit her up for some tips. All right, before we head off, an important thing I haven't brought up yet, but this is kind of really the next step in my writing journey. Getting an agent. What do you want to look for in an agent, and how should you approach them?
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem for me now, because I've just been out of that for so
long.
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, there aren't many of them in Australia.
Yeah, probably not many good ones either, right?
I honestly don't know. I mean, there are some very good ones. I mean, the thing is about agents, okay. A good agent knows the market. That's their job. So if you give them something and they're like, oof, so-and-so isn't going to take this, but I think so-and-so are looking for this. And if I tell them that, it's getting very hard though these days to actually talk to people in the publishing industry, because apparently since COVID, everybody's at home and they're very stressed, and But and that's the agent. Apart from, okay, my agent's very rare because she is actually a lawyer. So she graduated as a lawyer. So her ability to do actual, like, you know, contracts is extraordinary, and her ability to negotiate, that's part of it. It's negotiating, and it's so great because you don't have to do it. And she deals with, oh my God, the worst stuff. Like, there's this thing, and it's great. It's fantastic. It's called ELR, Educational Lending Rights and Public Lending Rights. And basically what happens, because government libraries and schools buy your book and then lend them out to people, that deprives you of income, right? So in response to that, they pay you a small amount of money. But if you've got a lot of books out there, it can make quite a lot of money.
Sure, yeah.
Quite a few $1,000s.
Like a royalty, essentially.
It's kind of like a royalty, but it goes up and down. It depends what's on you. It depends how many people are borrowing, how many libraries you're in, all of that kind of stuff. But every year you get one educational lending right for school libraries and just public lending rights for usual libraries. So, oh God, what was I talking about when I got into that stuff? Agents. So, but getting that in is hideous, and dealing with it is hideous. Like, there's all this paperwork, which I can't stand, you know, forms. And so she does it, and then she just gives me the money, and it's so great.
Oh, that's great.
So that's awesome. That. And also her dealing with back and forth on money. Writers aren't supposed to care about money. It's just so bizarre. And and you'll get offers and there'll be no mention of the money. And you say, what's the money? Like, you have to bring it up. It's because it's your vocation. You don't care. You're like a nun.
Yeah. You're just what's the term? Like a starving artist, right?
Yeah. Well, artist in a garret. It's been. It's not like it's changed. You know, like.
It's in just fact, can I just what you say, do? You know, it's so pure.
Anybody interested in writing at all? My favourite book in the whole wide world is called New Grub Street by George Gissing.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, it's for writers because it was written in like 1882 or something, and it's about a bunch of writers in different kind of writers. So there's a novelist, there's a journalist, there's an essayist, there, you know, like a sort of a paid essayist who's just churning stuff out. All of these different kinds of writers, all kind of interconnected, all trying to make their way in the world, and it just speaks to me so much. Even now, it's just like writer in a garret. There's a writer in a garret, literally. Like there's an artistic writer who's written sort of one great book, you know, and you know the whole thing revolves around money. That's all it's about. Like it's so fascinating. You have to read. Anybody.
I will. That sounds great. That sounds great.
It starts a bit slow, but then the minute it starts in the country, and it sort of feels a bit Jane Austen-y and all that. And you think, but then I think it's like chapter 2. It goes to Edwin Reardon, and Edwin Reardon is the novelist. He's probably the hero of the thing. Yeah, who's probably more similar to George Gissing than anyone else, and he's wrestling right at the start with this terrible novel problem, and and that's where it really flies. You know, I often when I reread it, I sometimes skip the first bit and I just go to read him because he's just start there and I just keep going.
Okay, so start chapter 2 is what you're saying.
Well, no, start chapter 1 if it's the first time.
Okay, fair enough. Just before. Okay, cool. No, I will read that. That sounds fascinating. One other just little thing before we wrap up, because I don't want to take too much of your time. Audiobooks. Now, me and the Writers Collective that this podcast is sort of sponsored by, I guess, Precipice Fiction. We have a book coming out called The New Mythic, which is nice. It's been recommended for a few Aurealis Awards, which is cool. But we're doing, yeah. We got a few little things for that, which is awesome.
Hang on.
But we're doing an audiobook now. We're putting it to. Oh, nice. Oh, you won one.
I did. I won one.
I didn't know. What was that for?
1997. That was for a book called Eye to Eye. I read it recently.
Wow.
It was not great.
Okay. Well, okay. The funny thing is, I'm actually judging for one panel of the Aurealis Awards right now. I'm not going to say which one because that's unethical, but I am going through it, and there's some dross. There's some dross in there.
I admire you. I've done one judging, and I found it unbelievably stressful. I can't bear passing judgment. I found it so hard.
See, I don't mind the passing judgment. It's the massive workload that you have to go through.
Well, it's a massive workload, and it's never very well paid.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm because I'm getting older. I'm getting quite. I'm a bit lazy when it comes to reading. I don't want to spend too much. And look, I was told, look, just read the first few pages if you don't like it, and I feel so guilty. Like you know.
Yeah, I'm like, I got to read at least 25% because there's a system on it that's like 0 to 5. Did you like it or didn't you like it? And 0 is did not finish, and I just can't bear myself to write into them. But I guarantee you, I will not read all those books. Anyway.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, how can you?
No, it's
extraordinary.
There's heaps of them. So yeah, it's pretty rough.
So
anyway.
you know, after years, you kind of get the like. I'm good enough as a writer and I suppose as a reader that you can tell if someone knows what they're doing.
You can tell in 3 pages for sure.
Yeah. And whether it's worth going on. I mean, you know, they just know what they're doing. You can tell.
Exactly. One other thing, audiobooks. Do you have any say in how those come together? Because I'm listening to the Traced one. To be honest, I read a lot of audiobooks. Nothing to do with it.
I am given a contract and I go, okay, I'll sign it. And I'll sign it. And then for the first time ever, text publishing, unlike any other publishing, anybody else, or no, it's Belinda. Maybe Belinda Books. Belinda Books has been doing mine for years. Yeah, Belinda. And lately, over the last few years, they've actually been sending me voice samples of.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is amazing. I never had any choice before. They just decided, and I would receive it, and it would go bang in. I'd open the parcel, like, oh, it's an audio book. I didn't even know they were making this. You know, like lately, over the last about 4 or 5 years, they've been sending me. You know, like they usually give me a choice of 2.
Yeah,
I've obviously whittled it down to 2, and then they give it to me, and they say, which one do you think? And I don't know if they say, I think I prefer this. Maybe they do. I can't remember. But I'll listen for a while, and I say, well, honestly, in terms of my mental image of my, you know, my character and how they speak, it's probably they're both great, but maybe more this one. But you know, usually by the time I get them, they're both brilliant anyway. So
I mean, the one for Traced is incredible. She's really good and just nails that voice. Like she sounds like it. Fantastic. I think we can probably leave it there. Is there any let's do the real cliche thing and say, like, is there any advice you would give to a young writer? What's the one piece of advice you'd give?
Read.
Read.
I know that sounds stupid, but if you're going to be writing thrillers, you've got to be reading thrillers. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And you've got to be reading good thrillers. Like, don't read crap because it doesn't give you enough of a bar to head for. Like when I was young, I was reading. There wasn't the choice there is now, and it's so hard. Choice just makes things harder. But I was reading stuff like George Orwell and Evil and War, and this is when I was in my teens. Yep. So. Boy, they knew what they were doing in the most massive way. Absolutely. I mean, they possibly didn't know what they were doing in the modern sense, but even George Orwell has really weathered well. He's still clear of the bell. Yeah, you know,
1984 is still one of the greatest thrillers ever written, without a doubt.
But his style is still very gripping. Like like a lot of style. The ones that were clear, Somerset Maugham, George Orwell, and Evil and War, they had a.
I always get those two mixed up, Somerset Maugham and Evelyn Waugh. I've read them both, but I always get them mixed up.
But like they both had those clear, slim, like lean styles.
They're small books. They're little books.
Some of them. Of Human Bondage is chunky.
Yeah,
but Evil and War knew how to take everything out. Like unlike a lot of the writers at that time, he was just very lean, and so he's still so funny. Oh my god. Even though some of the humor can be But it's 1920s. Yeah, I guess just reading is the most important thing, because frankly, you wouldn't be writing if you weren't into reading, probably.
Yeah, totally.
But
Well, let's hope
also,
not.
I guess it's harder now, but in some ways you have more ways to go. Like there was only one way to go. Like it was like when I was at university, there were hardly any different like degrees that you could do. That like now you have a million different kinds of degrees that can fit. Then you only had sort of one, a nice degree, and it was only with a few things, So nowadays you only had the possibility of publishing on a traditional publishing, and that was it. Now I can see, my daughter says that probably if I'd been born now, I would be doing much more of this. There are more ways to channel your creativity now. There are
Absolutely
lots of different ways. Even I've just started to do it with this video channel. Like on the one hand, it's more choice and it's kind of harder, but on the other hand, you've got more places to nail things as opposed to just one way of doing it.
It's not as homogenized. You can kind of diversify yourself effectively, which is pretty cool.
and as you're doing with podcasts and all of these sorts of different things and self-publishing, and there's all kinds of things that people can do, and I just feel like take advantage of it, because I never had it to take advantage of. I mean, I think honestly, one of the reasons that we had this surge in children's publishing that really helped me with Harry Potter and a few things, that took off. I remember, like, we were only able to publish internationally because of the email. Email came in, and suddenly we were publishing overseas. It was so much easier.
Right, because you didn't have to mail the manuscript, right?
Yes, manuscript. The editing back and forth, I mean, forget about it. It was ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
Whereas emails, you could just, so it's just like, and that just opened up Australian publishing, like just the email. So I know it sounds funny, but
no, for sure.
Now that you've got all of these other things, you can open things up. And if you're particularly, if you I don't know, if you understand branding but the thing is, branding and all of that stuff is one thing, but it's who you are that's what's going down on the paper.
Yeah, of course.
And if the trouble is, if you're a bit different, but now you see, you can find your different little,
you can find a niche,
whereas once upon a time you couldn't. So if you're a bit different and you didn't quite fit into that one homogenous thing, you were stuffed. You couldn't do it.
Right.
It's not going to happen. But anyway, that's all I'm like.
Just diversify and find your niche, I guess.
I'm beginning to think that's the way. The other thing is, I mean, it's funny because the traditional publishers are trying to find their way right now, because it's becoming so difficult.
Sure.
They're all in a bit of a state. They don't know. They don't, like, they're trying to find what's going to sell, and it's really, really hard.
Sure.
Then so that's it there. Then my agent and I are trying to work out what the publishers are wanting, because you know what I mean. It's looking for the market. The market thing is so profound at the moment, and that is so bad for the way you write. I know it's been bad for
writing to market.
My writing to market is so hard. But if you've done it for years, if you've done writing for years, you can channel it. And look, some people have it as their jobs for in the creative industry, in like advertising, and so it's not impossible. You know what I mean? It depends what you're writing for, to some degree.
I guess it depends what you want to get out of it.
Yes, and what you want to get out of it.
Yeah, it's like some people want to write exclusively to, like there's plenty of self-publishing people who are churning out books, like just literally churning them out at a faster rate than you or I or anyone I know.
Well, that's somebody who needs to that's somebody who needs to write. They have to cope. That's
part of who they are.
And look, fair enough. I mean, hey, it's a great coping and everything. I'm not like, I probably do need a therapist, but I haven't had one all these years because I've been writing.
Because you've written it down. Yeah, exactly.
Well, not exactly written it down. It's not written it down. I don't.
No, but you've channeled it.
I don't go from here and bring it out. I'm a person who goes there and brings it in. And the idea is, you get so you create the world that you're happy in.
Yes.
And it's not like you're exploring your own, which some people do in writing. That's what they do. That's what their whole thing is, and that's fine. And often they're the finest books. But I just want to escape into something that
you just want to get lost in a book for a couple of hours. I'm the same way. I mean, like I said, I run a guitar school, and I just go out flying every day. And you better believe I've got an audiobook that I'm doing that. And then when I get home, I got another physical book that I read.
But when you're actually writing, you need to escape.
Yes.
The flow state, as you know, that you get into when you're actually just cobbling sentences together.
Yeah.
The craft of it, as opposed to the creativity of it, which is when you're creating the ideas. The creating the ideas thing, nothing feels better than when you get the right one.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It's a rush.
But it can also be very stressful because you're trying to get this bit and this bit and join them together, and it's not working, and it's not working, and it's not working, and it's not working, and you're just going, but when you're cobbling the words together, that's more craft, and it's absorbing, and you forget everything else, and it's just
the world just disappears.
It just disappears.
The only thing I would compare it to, and it's probably a fairly obvious comparison, is playing on stage music. It's the same thing. It's the same thing where you're in the moment, and it's like there's usually a lot more alcohol involved in music, but you're in the flow state and you're just doing it, and those two things are really the only time that I've found that piece of that sense of like, oh, I'm here, I'm in the world. You know what I mean? Like you're completely present. It's
well,
really
I'm not exactly present when I'm putting
well, no, it's not you're present, but like you're absorbed is probably a better word.
You're absolutely absorbed.
Yeah.
And the time passes, and then the satisfaction when you got it together and you sit back and you look at what you've done.
And you go, I just did 1,500 words, and I didn't even notice. It's crazy. It's a crazy, crazy thing.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's probably a good place to leave.
Good time to sign off.
Yeah. Thank you so much for no, thank you. Jinx. Oh, wait.
Get that all on. Anyway.
Sorry. So, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, I must have. I'll have a. Sorry, I'll go and have a look. I think I'll look. I'm better on YouTube than I am.
Yeah. Check it out. And what was the name of your YouTube channel again? So just so I can put it on the end.
Storybook Cottage Writer.
Storybook Cottage Writer. I've actually
I'm going to be talking like it's going to be sort of moving between scenic mountain stuff, gardens and what have you, and kind of relating that to various aspects of the story process. Cool. Like things that you need, like mystery or magic, or things that you do like starting a book, like starting stuff, trying to relate that back to or getting ideas or anything like that. That's or inspiration, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of a mixture of kind of tech, like writing procedure.
Yeah.
And just nice flowers and trees and buildings.
We love some thematic resonance. I love it. I'm all about it. All right, cool, Catherine. I'll see you later. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Talk to you later. Bye.
You're listening to Prose Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.